This is the Page Publishing Book Club. How you doing? I'm Alice Stockton Rossini, special angel, special friend. About Bernadette Lindemer's spiritual journey through her husband's sickness and death was her first book published with Page. Now she's written a fictional story entitled No Ordinary Love, The Year of the Cat. And you worried that this book might be too controversial to publish. Why do you think so?
It involves a couple that are in two opposite ends of their lives. So I kept fighting with myself because I kept saying, no, this isn't something you can write. But then I just decided, go with it, because whatever the inspiration was, where it was coming from, I was going with the flow, and the words were just pouring out of me. And I loved writing the story. But it's basically, as I said, about two people from opposite sides of the world at different stages of their lives being brought together through a series of events and spiritual revelations that unwittingly contributes to their making decisions that change their lives forever. And I don't know how well it will be received.
Okay, so what is it?
The two main characters are Cassandra Byrne, a widow, and a senior citizen. She's approaching her 70s. And she thinks her life's going okay until she retires, and then starts to wonder what the heck she's going to do with the rest of her life. The gentleman in it, Ian Flannery, he's a 40-something Irishman who is an art history teacher, who has had a tragedy in his life and has gone through two failed relationships, causing him to leave his family and travel across the seas to the United States to search for a new life, because he was just feeling like his life wasn't going anywhere. And they come together very serendipitously in a ballroom atmosphere. And it's very interesting because it talks about the controversy about people who are attracted to each other, but they're in different stages of their lives. And the fact that she was not the one initiating the relationship, he was more so than she after they got to know each other. But I believe it's a story for this time, because after going through COVID and seeing people losing their spouses to a horrible disease through this pandemic and being isolated and away from family and friends and everything, it was just one of those things that I kept thinking to myself, what if?
Bernadette, I love this because it's always the older guy who gets the woman in her 40s. It's never the older woman.
Right.
That is attracted to a guy in his 40s is attracted to a woman who's almost 70. I think that's great.
Yep.
You think that's controversial?
Well, because you don't really hear very much about older women. You hear more about the older man, and it's more accepted in society than the other way around. But the more I thought about it, the more I thought, no, you have to talk about this. I bring to life Tina Turner and Joan Collins in my thoughts while I'm writing the story. And at one point I do reference Joan Collins. I think she's 86, and her husband is like 30 years her junior. So, and they're still together. So it was one of those things that, as I said, because of the fact that I come from a rather traditional background, I'm Catholic, I'm raised in a certain guilt trip way. you just...
I married a Catholic. I know about guilt.
Exactly. You just say to yourself, well, I don't know, but, this is where I was, and God inspired me. Music also inspires me, and during the course of this time, I kept hearing three songs. One was The Year of the Cat, Al Stewart. The other one was No Ordinary Love by Sade, and then the other one was Love is the Answer. And to me, the whole thing evolves into, the bottom line is, it doesn't matter who you love, it's how you love and the way you love. And love is the answer. To me, that's what makes this world wonderful, that people do love each other. And you just want to try to promote hope and love, specifically now, because our world has changed, Alice, dramatically. It's definitely not the same as it was 3 years ago, 4 years ago, when this whole thing started.
That is for sure, Bernadette. Thank you so much. A few decades back, Carolyn Addy had a crazy idea: put the titles of all the Beatles songs together and make a story, then encourage the reader to try and find them. The title of her book, With a Little Help from My Friends. All right, Carolyn, give me an example.
It kind of says it on the cover. On the front of the cover, it says, Step Inside Love for a Day in the Life of a Paperback Writer. So Step Inside Love, A Day in the Life, and Paperback Writer. They're all song titles.
So what kind of a story did you come up with?
It's a little bit of a fantasy where I, as the main character, wake up in the morning feeling kind of lost about our troubled world. And I am sound asleep. And all of a sudden, when I wake up, there's these little characters that come in and grab me and whisk me away in their spaceship and take me to their planet called Savoy Truffle, which is actually the name of one of their songs. And the Glass Onion, which is the name of the spacecraft, is actually another song. And I get to know these little abolets, which if you mix up the letters in that, it would actually say Beatles. And all the characters are the Beatles names that are mixed up. So we have Ulap, the main character, and if you mix up his letters, his name would be Paul. So as I'm there, the bonds of friendship go deeper and deeper. And then I find out why I was chosen as the chosen one. And I don't know if in my world of dreams or if my friends drifted into my world of reality. So throughout the book, I don't know whether I'm dreaming or if this is really real. And at the end, I do find out. And they actually have an extra eye. And that kind of says that they kind of see the world a lot more clearer than we do. It's a great fairy tale, too, for younger people. I mean, I would have liked to put it in the genre of children's because two of my grandchildren that are both 7, they're loving it. And they're loving the idea to find the song titles, which I have at the end of the book, you could find. And, it's fun for them. So if you have a highlighter and you're reading the book and as you go through them, it was pretty difficult putting in 323 songs into a story. And of course, some of the song titles were pretty difficult, but I managed to do it. I think they're just waiting to be discovered by the reader as a fun and entertaining challenge. Trying to unravel the letters and the names of the main characters is also fun. And plus, not only that, but I have the wives and the girlfriends, and those thought to be the 5th Beatle.
You're funny. You must have been some kind of fan.
Yeah, you know what? In the beginning, I wasn't, but then it kind of caught on. And then, after listening to, their songs and how really great they were is amazing. And then once I did that and started getting into all their albums, I mean, I went from the albums from, the American albums, and then there was the albums that they did in England and, the anthology albums. The research was incredible to find the titles. That really took a lot of time. And that, believe me when I tell you, I had to go through so much research just to get all the titles to make sure that I got not only the popular ones, but I made it a little difficult for really, really hardcore Beatle fans because I have rarities, I have early tapes, I have demos, I have giveaways, I have covers. It's really, I think, a Beatle fan to find out how much of a Beatle fan they are by going through this book and to discover how many titles they can really, really name. I mean, everybody knows, like, I Want to Hold Your Hand. But do they know Savoy Truffle or do they know Being for the Benefit of Mr. Kite? Try to put that one in.
No, I can't even imagine. But you know what you got to do is at all your book signings, hand out highlighters. And whoever finds the most songs gets a prize. All right. Benjamin Sanford is a retired air marshal with an extremely active imagination that has produced a number of book series, including Freeborn, which we discussed about a year ago. And now he's written the Chronicles of Arak series. And this is book 1 entitled Of War and Heroes.
there's a big difference between the genres of sci-fi and fantasy, and this is sort of a combination of it where the two of them kind of meet with a little mythology and religion in the background. It's set in a place called Arax, which is supposed to be a different world. It's 500 years into our future. There are people from Earth here, but they're sort of stranded like castaways, like a handful of Marines being dropped off in the middle of an ancient world, like ancient Rome or the Middle Ages. But what's unique about the story is that there are people from our world that we can relate to, sort of, so you have like a relationship to the story, but they're not the main focus. The main hero is a character named Karen. And at the beginning of the story, he's just a young kid, and he's been working with his father's farm. And his parents had arranged for him to be a minister's apprentice, a scribe, many miles away at some far off city. And that's where the story begins. And his father gives him this sword, and he finds out the sword is kind of magical in a way. It can cut anything it touches. But when he uses it, it's more powerful than when else uses it. And as the story unfolds, you see why he's different from everyone else. The god of this world is called Yah. And he created mankind in this world like he created mankind in our world. So it's along the lines of the Abrahamic religions. But in this world, when he cast demons out from heaven on our world, he cast them out into this world, but he put them in mortal forms. They're in the form of gargoyles or sort of demonic entities, but they're mortal, so they can't possess people's souls, but they terrible monsters that want to eat you. But the problem is they can fly. So mankind has been struggling against on this planet, these creatures for hundreds of years or thousands of years. And at one time in the past, they were able to overcome them because their God raised up a great king, but the people betrayed him. They didn't want to follow everything he wanted to do, but they wanted to get rid of the gargoyle. So as punishment, he removed him from the scene and allow things to happen as they will. And since that time, mankind has been battling against these creatures forever, and eventually they struck a delicate balance where all the peoples of this world kept them in check. Until up into the north, there was a revolution from a different group of people, and this another one human warlord aligned himself with gargoyles to destroy his enemies, and that allowed them to reproduce in great numbers because they have human allies, which sort of tipped the balance. Is this Benetrist empire, which is Benetrist, they're human tribes that became an empire. They're aligned with the gargoyles, so they're threatening to sweep over all the land and conquer it. And the story starts off in the middle of this kingdom in the middle of Arax called Tori North, and they're the people that are the most likely antagonists to the invasion coming from the north. So they're like the sort of the good guys holding back the tide. And the story revolves around this young kid, Taryn, leading on this, starting off in this adventure. He doesn't realize he's going to sort of just flow into the war and how everything else follows around him. And then you see the guys from Earth, you'll eventually meet them relatively quick and how they intervene with the story. And it's kind of like this world is populated with lots of different creatures, whether they're large primates that speak or reptilians and these winged people called Shani. And the whole thing is about the story is about them bringing all these different peoples together to defeat this evil. Without together, they can't do it. So it's kind of like a medieval version of World War II on their planet with all these different characters involved.
All right, Benjamin, keep up the good work. A motivational speaker and deeply spiritual young man, Stefan Raphael has written a book to help us free ourselves from depression, anxiety, guilt, and evil thoughts in his book, Breaking the Yoke, The Unruly Mind.
When I was younger and growing up in life, I had a lot of mental battles, never understood what was the reason, never understood the power of my mind. So through a journey that I went through, listening to powerful sermons, experiencing personal deliverance, that empowered me to really just write this book to empower and help other people, get down to the root of what is impacting them and to help them to live victorious in their life.
Can you give me an example of your unruly mind?
I have to say, the unruly mind is common to every human being on earth. So the unruly mind is just literally the mind of sin. So, for example, a thought of murder, a thought of adultery, even thoughts of accepting depression, thoughts of accepting guilt, thoughts of acceptance to anxiety, that is fostered by the unruly mind because those are not in God's plan for us because he says, be anxious for nothing. So my book entails a lot of anecdotal experiences that I've been through. It combines both a theological and a psychological perspective. So sharing what I've been through and what others have been through and personal teaching that I have been empowered to empower others. At one point in my life, I remember going through a lot of depression, consistent cycles of depression. So I remember one of the times, I was praying and I was, saying, Lord, I'm tired of this situation. I want to get over this. And I remember the Lord said to me, "You'll never be delivered unless your mind is delivered from it." So for me, it was a state of mind, right? It was believing every other word and every other concept that people said or what the enemy was bringing to my mind. As we know, we're all tempted. Every human being on the face of the earth is tempted. In the book also, in the chapter of the power of influence, I talk about the influencing force behind the influencing thought. So the only way we're going to really understand the entire concept of this is to really realize that we are in a spiritual world, and there are spiritual forces that are affecting the way that we think, that are affecting sometimes the things that we do based on what we agree on through our thoughts and the things that we say. This book provides you with godly principles to liberate anyone from mental imprisonment, right? Many people around the world feel imprisoned in their minds. And one of the thing is, your mind is, I will say, it is secretive to everyone else around you, because you could be sitting down somewhere, no one knows what's going on in your mind but yourself. And sometimes we are threatened with guilt to feel condemned because, we're thinking things that we're like, oh my God, if anyone ever knows this is what I'm thinking, they'll feel so afraid of me or would despise me. So the book really helps us to understand from a psychological and a godly perspective how the mind operates. What is the mind? What is the unruly mind? And then it empowers us with choices and with the principles that God has given us. We talk about the weapons of war to defeat evil thoughts. We address fear. We address oppression. Everything that you can possibly think of from a biblical standpoint that God has given in His manuscript to man to empower us to think in the way that He has called us. And then, most importantly, the ultimate goal is not to make emphasis on the unruly mind, it is to take us to a state of the renewed mind, which is the mind of Christ. So that's the whole concept of this book. Lead man back to the renewed mind, the mind of Christ.
All right, Stefan, thank you. Chris Blurton works in IT in Texas and finds himself writing mostly in the middle of the night when inspiration strikes him. But it was the gift of time he found during the pandemic that moved him to write his sci-fi fantasy, Murdoch 1.
Murdoch, the idea of Murdoch was actually 20 years in the making. Believe it or not, you always have this idea in your head, it sticks in the back of your mind. I'd always been interested in writing ever since, high school. And, just never found the time, right? Career, family, but always had in the back of my mind. And then the pandemic, the lockdown, sitting at home. And I said, well, if I'm ever going to do it, it's going to be now.
Good for you.
Of course, the idea of Murdoch, set in my mind many years ago. And I'm not trying to throw my age out there, but, the Alien series and Heavy Metal Magazine and comics were a part of my younger life. And that definitely motivated me. And I was always interested in science. Of course, I'm in IT now. So Murdoch is set, of course, space and outer space. And, of course, that's coming to the forefront lately. The Mars mission, and we're trying to get the unmanned mission to the moon. And they just had the DART project, slamming a satellite into an asteroid for analysis and experimentation. Of course, living in Texas, which is the space capital of the world right now.
Well, I mean, you came up with this 20 years ago and now it's perfect. It's right on time.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I guess sometimes things are on the timing. I had this idea in mind, and I had some characters in mind, and all that, but it just kind of, as I started putting it on paper, my the plot took twists and turns, and the storyline took twists and turns. Adding characters in, and next thing you know, the book has taken a direction all its own. A group of scientists, particularly Johnny Conrad, he's a astrophysicist and a radio telescope astronomer, and he intercepts a signal in space, just randomly, and just starts to investigate that, and eventually, he actually interacts with the Mordock, and of course, not only him, but it becomes an international space race of sorts where these other astronomers from other countries also, intercept the signal, and now they become interested as well, and they know that the U.S., through their sources, has found the signal as well. So now it's on, and all the kind of builds from there, thinking that there might be some extraterrestrial life out there, and to try to reach out to those beings or whatever's out there and make contact with them.
So what kind of a predicament is Mordock in?
The Mordock are an ancient entity. They've been around since, the Big Bang, so to speak. They are, stardust. They don't have any physical presence that we are aware of, but they can project themselves, into our minds, and be able to project themselves telekinetically. They can do things of that sort, but they're just very limited on their. They've somehow ended up in our solar system, and they're basically been reaching out, and of course, our astronomers just happen to get their signal, and and then of course, uh, the interaction begins between the extraterrestrials and the astronomers, and of course, um planet Earth itself.
So why do these dark forces want to destroy Earth?
The Persticon know about the Mordock, and they know that they're the only threat to them because they want universal dominance, a destructive force. They want to take over the entire universe. They have no morality. They just have one agenda: is to take over the universe. And the Mordock are aware of this, and they are the only ones that could possibly stop them. And then Volume 2, Maelstrom, is the name of it. It just kind of brings that all together into this chaotic race against time, and against forces beyond belief, to try to save Earth, basically, and humanity itself, if not the universe.
All right, Chris, thank you. Finally, Yu-Hu Che works with computers in Georgia and has developed a new concept for IT workers and managers called infobody theory and infobody model, defined as any physical body that contains information.
So that means any word, any language, any text, any image, and even for the real thing, like a car, it also indicated some information, right? Tell you something. That's a car. So those are all the info body. We can separate this info body into two groups. Reality info body, like the car, like the tree, everything in the reality. Another group I name translative info body. It's not the reality. That's translated to something, for like any language, and then even the image created in human brains. So those are all the info bodies, but those are translative. And also we talk about a model called info body model. Any info body can be as an input, can be processed to create a new info body, or a set of info body as the input to the processor to create a set of new info bodies. So this is the basic process for all those info body processing. Some info body as the input for some processor, then create a new info bodies. Those called the output info body. The output info bodies can also be a input info body for a new processor, then create another set of new info bodies. So all this they link together to become a structure. So that structure I call the info body structure. So that book basically is talking about all those different kinds of info body structure. And this kind of structure I created in two ways. One is I just call it info body charting. We can make charts to describe this info body structure from input to process to the output, then to put another process, then create a new output, and all those link together. This we can use some to make a chart. Another info body model is based on the group graph theory. The graph theory, the talking about the relationship between the things. That one is all the mathematical description of the info body model, talking about the input, the output, and the processor. Specifically, that is the more complicated is any info body may contain other info body, and then those info body can also contain some other info body. So there is a containing chain. Okay. So we have a lot of containing chains. Take input and create output. And the input actually not only for a single info body, there can be a info body containing chain. So this become more complicated. So containing chain in terms of graph theory, containing chain is a kind of a graph. And input and output, this is another kind of graph that I call the paired graph. Paired graph means from the input to the processor, and always paired with another relation from the processor to the output. And the input and output each is a containing chain. So the whole info body model in terms of the graph theory, so that I call that is a paired graph on a containing chain. So that the containing chain becomes a elements for the paired graph. And then the paired graph becomes the input output to describe the whole input output structure.
What do we use this for?
A lot of places we can use almost anywhere. Because the concept, the info body, the concept is so general. We can say everything is an info body, right?
All right, whatever you say. Whatever you say. Thank you so much. That is all the time we have for this edition of the Page Publishing Book Club. If you want to find out more about our authors, their books, their stories, their process, just go to pagepublishing.com and tell all your writing friends to download the podcast at 710WOR.com. I'm Alice Stockton Rossini. I'll catch you next time.